is here on Michigan's Morning Show with Michael Patrick Shields.
Michael Patrick Shields is on the air.
Good morning, world.
Good morning, Michigan. A very pleasant Tuesday to you. It's Michael Patrick Shields, heard all across the state of Michigan. There was a Republican presidential debate last night, 2 hours long. Maybe the biggest news that came out of the debate is that the Republicans didn't smash at each other too much. They mostly took swipes at President Obama. But the big news, probably, I guess, the official announcement from Minnesota U.S. Representative Michelle Bachmann, who announced she is officially running for president. Here's what that sounded like.
I filed today my paperwork to seek the office of the presidency of the United States today, and I'll very soon be making my formal announcements.
Well, that should spice things up, I guess. Governor Rick Snyder was in New York City yesterday. He went there with the state treasurer, Andy Dillon, and the budget director, John Nixon. They were, I think, selling their story, Michigan's story, your story, my story, and our story, to Wall Street. And Andy Dillon, who ran for the Democratic nomination for governor, is and one-time Michigan Speaker of the House, is on the other end of our line right now. Good morning.
Good morning, Michael Patrick. How are you?
Good. You know why I can't be in politics ever? I know Frank Beckman's been fooling around with the idea of maybe running for U.S. Senate, but here's why I couldn't be in politics. If I went to New York City as the governor of Michigan, first thing, I would fly private. I would stay at the Waldorf Astoria. I would lunch at 21, have dinner at Le Cirque, and wrap it all up with a nightcap at the Rainbow Room. That's probably not what your trip was like, I'm guessing.
That's the kind of guy I'd want to vote for.
I heard that. But you were
we left at 8 and got back about 9 p.m. And visited 3 of the rating agencies. So it was a little bit of a whirlwind tour. We ate in the boardroom of Moody's and ate on the plane on the way back.
It's an austerity these days, isn't it, for the most part? What were the selling points? And, in sort of common English, what were you trying to accomplish?
It's a long-term process to get your credit rating, improved. But the goal was to lay the foundation, to share with them the vision of the governor, to let them know that, we are seeing improving revenues, that we've hit the bottom, we're starting to grow jobs in Michigan, and that we put in place a 2-year budget that spends what's coming in, and we're not using any one-time money to fund ongoing expenditures. And it was pretty much just that simple message to say, look, we're getting our house in order here in Michigan.
How do you think it went over? Could you tell?
Yeah, very well. And these people are people that have been following and studying Michigan and our municipalities and schools for years. So it's not like, it's the first time they've heard this, the story of Michigan. So, they understand that we're dependent on automotive, so they ask a lot of questions about that. They know that we have some local units of government that are in distress, and they want to know about what's going on there. So it'd be like talking to someone that's from Michigan and follows Michigan's politics because they're informed.
The cover of Time magazine and the big story and the issue that I'm looking at from this week says, "Don't hold your breath. This is not your father's recovery. It might not even be a recovery at all. Debunking the myths of the new American economy." And then we heard earlier this week President Obama say he's not worried about a double-dip recession. I know that we're all hoping that we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but is that light at the end of the tunnel a train?
Michael Patrick, I think I'm not a pessimist, but at this time it is different. And I'm actually reading a book right now called The End Game, and it follows one that I read before that called This Time It's Different. And when a country gets to the level of debt that we have, it's very difficult to see robust growth again. And I think if you go back, and one of the books goes back to 1280 and studies all nations that get to debt levels of this load that we have, and you'll see moderate growth, moderate inflation. You'll see more recessions. We've kind of broken past a little bit of a Rubicon here, and we've got $14 trillion of debt. It almost equals our GDP, and that's not a good thing. And unfortunately, we're not Greece. I mean, we have our own currency, and we have a more dynamic economy. So if we're America of old and remain inventive and entrepreneurial, we'll work our way through this. But both parties have to start getting to the table and negotiating a solution for the people of this country. Otherwise, we'll have some rough days ahead of us.
Well, you're in an interesting time in Michigan, to be sure, and I'm presuming that someday we'll look back and say, wow, that Dillon and Snyder and Nixon and those guys, they did some pretty heavy lifting at the time.
Well, what I love about the governor is he's wants to do the right thing, and people may disagree with him, but he listens. You always feel like you can share your opinions with him, but he has a very clear vision, and he's very task-oriented, as you can tell in his first 5 months. A lot got done. So, I think we are at a crossroads for Michigan, and we need to, do some heavy lifting and get the state on solid footing, and I think it is. I mean, before I went to the legislature, I spent 10 years, calling on companies in Michigan, once as a lender and another as a buyer, and I see a change. I mean, I think the cleansing that happened with GM and Chrysler has led to a healthier economy in Michigan. If you recall, we had these artificial companies that were spun out of GM, Ford, Visteon, and Delphi, and we had lots of excess capacity in the supply base. Now, if you go visit an auto supplier, I mean, there's smiles on their face. They're making money. They're growing. We can make money at less than, about 10 million units a year as opposed to 16 and 17 million units a year. So I see that we have a good, solid foundation upon which to grow the state's economy now.
Do you think that, like Mitt Romney does, and he's talked about it, that would have been a better option to have General Motors and Chrysler have bankruptcy instead of bailout?
No, and they did have bankruptcy, but where I disagree with him is there's no bank big enough to do what they call a debtor-in-possession financing. I mean, General Motors needed, what was it, $50 billion. I mean, the banks were on their knees at that time, and I think Mitt knows this. I think he's playing a little bit of politics here, but there just no bank could underwrite that financing. When you never took a company that large through a bankruptcy before and had it come out, was there going to be consumer confidence at the other end? It's a big challenge, but it was impossible for the private sector to bail out a company that big. And I was told, and don't hold me to this, but I think there's only 2 original equipment manufacturers, automakers in the world that have not gone through a restructuring with their government.
Wow.
And it's because they're so big. You can't get Comerica Bank to do a $50 billion deal.
What's it like to be a Democrat in a Republican administration?
Yeah, I think it's healthy, and maybe that's part of the reason why they asked, is I think that, if this country's going to start solving its problems, the two parties have to start working together. And, for just one window of time, can we just put down our guns and say, all right, let's get the country back on good footing again, and then we'll go compete later. But we got to win together going forward.
Have you seen the Notre Dame throwback uniforms for the Michigan night game?
On my phone, I get these little Bleacher Report emails that pop up, and I saw that yesterday, but I didn't open it up, so I haven't seen it.
Okay.
So I'm so regretting that I can't go to the game this year. I've got a conflict, and very disappointed.
That would have been fun. They have a shamrock on the helmet, and they have otherwise the uniform's fairly standard, but I know you're a busy guy, so that's going to be on the back burner for the moment. But great to catch up with you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Take care, Michael Patrick.
Yeah, dining at 21, maybe Sardi's. Hey, see a show, then you go to Sardi's. That's how that works. But they didn't do any of that in New York. It was all business, selling Michigan's story to Wall Street. A great Notre Damer, Andy Dillon. Michael Patrick Shields, Michigan's Morning Show.